You are listening to Mining Stock Education.
I'm going elephant hunting, right? I'm looking for companies that are developing deposits that have minimally 10x upside. And my thesis and my rationale for that is that, let's just say I have a portfolio of 10 stocks and 7 of them flame out. 2 of them do okay and 1 of them is a home run. Well, that home run is going to well more than make up for losses on the flameouts.
You're listening to Mining Stock Education, and I am your host, Bill Powers. And in today's show, you're going to hear from a returning guest. He hasn't been on the show in a while, but here to celebrate the gold and silver bull market in junior mining stocks, returning guest, Dave Kranzler of Investment Research Dynamics. Dave, thanks for coming back on the show.
Bill, thanks for having me back on. I apologize for my absence. I was dealing with some health issues that actually kind of affected, my tennis life also. So, but I'm back on track and as feisty as ever.
Yes. And you've had a super fan that has badgered me for months to have you back on the show. So I'm sure he's listening and he's happy. And
I appreciate that to the super fan out there.
Yeah.
But only one?
No. Yeah. Well, there was one that was vocal. So
no, I understand.
Yeah. So gold price, as we chat, gold's around 4,200. Silver's almost touching $53 last time I checked. What's your commentary here, Dave? And is there anything we can compare this to in history?
Are the metals really that high? I haven't noticed.
Yes.
Just kidding, obviously.
Yep.
There's a lot of factors here, not the least of which is that it's gold, the precious metals, and its role in an investment portfolio are finally starting to gain some traction among Wall Street and the wider spread public. Now, with respect to the attention that the big investment banks are giving it, the Morgan Stanleys, the Goldmans, et cetera. Well, I know for a fact Goldman has always had a gold bug aspect to it because I worked there after college in a 2-year analyst program, and there was a floor where you could walk by this window. It was obviously a highly secure room, and it showed some guys in there as they managed the stock of gold and silver bars that the bank owns. So, but I think what the primary read, well, first of all, obviously, price momentum gains attention, right? So for a long time, gold was being price managed by the larger forces that be out there in the financial system, i.e. the big banks, acting on behalf of Western central banks and governments. And it's gotten to the point where demand outside of the Western hemisphere has really spiraled higher quickly. And it's taken away sort of, the ability of Western interests to effectively manage the price and try to keep a lid on it, as a means of supporting the dollar as the reserve currency. So, and I don't know. I mean, my opinion is, again, this is just my opinion, and I'm not alone in this, is that I think there is a shift, and for sure in the Eastern Hemisphere, and who knows, it may be creeping into the Western Hemisphere outside of the U.S. sphere of influence. I think there's a shift to substantially reduce the dollar's role as the global reserve currency. I mean, it gets back to that old Rothschild adage, give me control of a nation's money supply and I care not who makes the rules, right?
And after the money supplies, give me control of the commodities would be the second thing they go after?
I mean,
we're going to see price controls here in the U.S. It looks like the Trump administration is doing that, right? Promising a rare earth floor.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a short-sighted attempt to put a lid on commodity price inflation, but that can only last so long, because if at the same time you're devaluing the currency, by printing money, increasing the money supply. And an interesting concept that, I mean, to me, it's pretty intuitive, but when a government issues debt certificates, so like the U.S. government issues treasuries, to me, that in a sense is a de facto form of money printing, because essentially you're printing those debt certificates and you're borrowing the money and recirculating that money. So you don't even, in other words, you're increasing the amount, the number of times each dollar circulates through the system, which in a sense is a way of increasing the money supply. So, I think the price inflation that we're experiencing right now is a combination of easy central bank policies, low interest rate policies, and massive government deficit spending. And a corollary to that, when the government is engaged in deficit spending, it's also competing for resources with the private sector. So it's borrowing money from the private sector, in effect, or having the Fed, print money via quantitative easing, and taking that capital and spending it on resources that are better allocated if it's left to just the private sector, in my opinion.
So obviously the rising gold price has helped out our junior gold stocks. What can you say about your portfolio over the last, let's say, this year?
It's done well.
Are you above that 200% mark?
If I take profits, I'll have a pretty big tax bill.
But long-term capital gains, right? Because you've held these for a little bit prior to this run-up?
It's, I like to mess around with trading. So I generate short-term gains as well. So short-term and long-term. I try to, and one of the things that I preach to my subscriber base is don't try to imitate or, replicate what I do. I'm not going to give you what my ideal portfolio is, because I take what a lot of people might consider to be, reckless risks with risky mining stock positions, or at least mining stocks that I believe are perceived as being risky. But if you believe that you have some type of analytic edge, they're not as risky as they might appear on the surface.
So when you're looking at the juniors you put in your portfolio, what is the biggest market cap? It's usually under $1 billion and usually under $500 million, even for some of those producers, I think, once you first put them in your portfolio, right?
Under 100 million.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm going elephant hunting, right? I'm looking for companies that are developing deposits that have minimally 10x upside. And my thesis and my rationale for that is that, let's just say I have a portfolio of 10 stocks and 7 of them flame out. 2 of them do okay, and 1 of them is a home run. Well, that home run is going to well more than make up for losses on the flameouts.
So you look for that edge. How do you get that?
That's my theory. Anyway.
No, I think that's smart. And even in a bull market, if you have 6 winners out of 10, because those 6 winners are going to go up so much that even if the other 4 don't go up much or only go up 30, 40%, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Exactly.
So what is your edge, Dave? Like, how can you describe your edge to listeners when you want that edge in these micro caps under 100 million market cap?
Well, there's a couple of factors, at least I like to believe. One is I don't publish on a company or recommend it. I will publish on a company where I haven't chatted with management, but I'll qualify it with, look, this is what I'm starting to look at. This is my initial impression. I haven't been able to have a conversation with management yet. But the ones that I pound the table on, or the ones occasionally I like to throw in names that I recommend avoiding. And, I won't do that at all unless I've chatted with management. And I don't, I just go in innocently. I don't let them know whether my predilection is negative or positive. I want to learn about the company, see what they're doing, and see if it makes sense to me.
And that's not necessarily a recommendation to short, though, when you say avoid, right?
Correct. Most people don't like to short anyway. I mean, I do have a newsletter that's specifically devoted to short selling, and the subscriber base is quite small compared to my mining stock journal. And that's fine. I actually really enjoy looking for and researching short sale candidates. And man, when you hit one or two that it's like once the rug is pulled out from under them. I mean, just for relative, for example, on relativity, a stock can drop from 20 to 5 in an instant, a lot more quickly than it can drop from 5 to 0. And there's an exhilarating rush when you've picked out a stock that does that. It's incredible.
So is your edge then calling management and using, because you're a former junk bond trader, right? You're not a geologist. So like, how do you bring that edge into your conversation with management? Well,
I think it's twofold. When I was in business school, I had this upper level accounting class. It was not that many people took it. The professor was some people would say he's a little bit weird. I thought he was awesome. I thought he was really funny, and his like he would teach you the material, but then his tests were mind benders, and you really you couldn't just memorize the accounting rules and expect to get a good grade on his exam. You really had to understand how to apply the accounting rules, and an A score on his exam would be a 70 out of 100. So that just kind of gives you an example of how difficult the exams were. I mean, I enjoyed the challenge of it, but I mean, it was grueling. I had to make sure I had a good night's sleep the night before. So I like to think that I have an edge in terms of my ability to dissect a company's financials intellectually. And then from there, when I decide what I personally think a company's worth, does it makes, where is that in comparison to what the stock market thinks it's worth?
And do you bring in some of the geos in your network to consult you as to the prospects of growing the financials through production growth and such? Or mine engineers, do you consult?
Well, I don't have independent mine engineer consultants. Funny story, I was sitting next to this guy who was a retired mine engineer, and he was an independent consultant. We sat there the whole hockey game. It was an Avalanche game, talking about, analyzing mining stocks. And one of the companies that I cover, I was running it by him, and he said, I'm not so sure that what they're trying to accomplish, they can accomplish given the geology of where their property is. And I actually put him in touch with the company CEO, and I could try and get a better understanding from this consultant standpoint on what he was thinking. And as it turns out, this particular property has some unique attributes to it that will in fact enable the company to achieve what it's trying to achieve. And this guy who I met at the hockey game, I chatted with him after he chatted with management. He goes, I would have said it can't be done, profitably, but I think this company has the ability to do that. So this guy, I'll definitely keep in touch with him. And it's just nice to be able to have someone who is, obviously trained and experienced as an operator in the industry to be able to bounce ideas off with and consult with.
You're in the foothills outside of Denver. Was he at the School of Mines working? Was he a professor?
No, he was just an independent consultant.
Okay.
I do have another very good relationship with the CEO of a company that I cover and recommend, Viva Gold, and Jim Hesketh. And he actually is a graduate of the School of Mines. He's actually a very interesting guy. He was raised in Barbados, believe it or not.
So Dave, on the idea of short selling. I believe you've told me in the past, if I recall correctly, you do not short mining stocks. But what do you, as someone who does short non-mining stocks, what do you think of when you see these short reports on mining stocks? I've seen a number of them.
Are you talking about the one on U.S. gold?
There was one on U.S. gold. There's been one on Emirat Nani's uranium company. There was another one recently.
So
It almost seems like those organizations are trying to just give themselves visibility or prominence by creating a ruckus, kicking up the dust over a short report, some of them.
yes, and actually, if the audience is interested, they can go to the Twitter feed and look up my name, and I sprayed bug spray all over this guy's short report on U.S. gold, and I actually had the co-founder of the company, a guy by the name of Luke Norman, who has a very successful track record in the industry. I actually had him address it as well also.
Did the short reporter even call management before writing the short report?
No, did not. And that's usually the case. There's another guy out there that hounds one of my favorite larger cap mining stocks. And I have a very tight relationship with upper management. And I've been to Africa to visit, their flagship mine. And, anyway, circling back to U.S. gold, I mean, I had the co-founder compose a tweet and put it on Twitter in response to this guy. And this guy still refused to back off. So, I mean, it just tells you, what a meathead this guy is.
So what do you think's behind that? Is it, I'm assuming by the way you're responding, you don't think it's honest intellectual work at play, especially if you don't talk to management. Is it just an attempt to market yourself and get notoriety for some of these guys?
I think that's part of it. I mean, honestly, I don't understand what this guy's rationale was for not backing off. I mean, it's not like he knows more about how to discover and advance a project and convert the project into a mine. I mean, I don't pretend that I know the intricate ins and outs of it either. I mean, I think I'm much more closer to the process than this guy who was slamming U.S. gold. And I do take the time and the care to chat with management. So I just don't understand, especially if you're going to put a short report out for public consumption. I just don't understand how you can possibly put that together honestly without at least giving management a chance to pitch their side of the story. That doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but you better have really good reasons for not agreeing with them.
I've even read short reports this year over claim disputes to where a short report claims that they're drilling on land that's not their own. And it's not worth it for me as a non-investor to see who's right, but I at least find it interesting. And that's a pretty big goof up if management was drilling on land they don't even have access to.
Yeah, I've seen that. I'm sure anything that you can think of that could possibly happen happens out there. So I just have not experienced or been involved with companies that have had that particular issue.
Are there any companies you are involved with or invested in you'd like to share, or what would make a good new gold stock pick in today's environment?
GDX, how about that? No, I'm just kidding. I mentioned U.S. gold, and again, notwithstanding this idiot out there who was, proliferating an ill-founded short thesis. I still think U.S. gold, and again, it'll depend on, what the price of gold does from here, obviously. I still think there's a very low risk-adjusted chance for a double or triple from here. And again, when I say risk adjusted, the amount of risk that you're taking to get a double or a triple is quite low on a relative basis.
And you've been in that stock for 8 years, right? Because you've been in U.S. Gold Corp for 8 years,
I've been
right?
in it for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in a lot of my stocks for a long time. It's it's great to finally see the sector get the kind of recognition that it should be getting. The only thing that I feel bad about is, I mean, you know, Bill Murphy, right? I mean, he's had worse illness issues than I've had. And so he's been kind of radio silent, kind of on the sidelines. I mean, Chris Powell is still is now the front man and operates SCADA. But, I would love to be able to get a hold of Bill and I've chatted with him over the phone several times in the past. I'd love to be able to get him on the phone and see what he thinks now. I'm just not really sure, that he's reachable at this point.
So what would be your exit strategy, Dave, for this market? Like a junior gold stock, even if you think gold's going higher and you're up 4, 5, 6, 7 times on these, how are you going to exit?
Whew, that's a really good question. Again, just because of the way the market changes and because of all of the way, the ways in which the data input can change, that, the data that goes into deciding whether to buy, hold, or sell. I mean, it's in constant flux, right? So I would just say, if you're sitting on stocks that you already have, doubles and triples in, take money off the table now. You mean probably going to miss some upside on some of that capital, but again, it's just, you just never know how quickly things can change. I mean, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just using it as an example. I mean, the Trump administration could all of a sudden come out with some sort of decree that takes away value from mining companies. And I don't know what that would be. I'm just saying, and then that's an example. You never know. What governments are unpredictable, and so there's always that risk, and that's impossible to quantify.
There's a company I bought under $9 a share 3 months ago. The Trump administration financed it. It hit $80 a share yesterday. When the Department of War is financing all these companies, Dave, it's kind of crazy. Like, you get an 8-bagger because the government is funding a mining company.
See, that's where I would just take all my money off the table. If you got an 8-bagger.
Well, I sold it before an 8-bagger, but I was just watching it as it went. I'm like, I had my gain. I was like, wow, I didn't think it was going to go that high that quickly.
Right. Don't get greedy there.
No.
8-baggers are rare.
Yeah.
Especially, again, I mean, I'm not saying this is specific to the Trump administration, but, Trump's probably a little less predictable than some of the recent previous presidents in terms of, his off the cuff remarks. And again, I'm apolitical. I hate both parties, or I shouldn't say I hate. I disrespect and despise both parties. But you got to admit there's definitely entertainment value with Trump.
You're the Mining Stock Journal that goes out once a week or once a month for listeners that are interested.
Out every other week. I try to get one out on a Thursday so that subscribers can, if they read it Thursday night, they can act on it on Friday. But it just kind of depends on my overall workload and how the week's gone. So sometimes it doesn't come out until the weekend.
Okay. And they can find info at investmentresearchdynamics.com, right?
That's correct. Okay. And also, they can just look me up on Twitter too. Just search David Kranzler. You get to my Twitter feed, and that has links.
Well, Dave, thanks for coming on the show for an update, and we hope you continue to feel better.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. It's great being on here, and look forward to coming on again.